For Yuchvat Tovshin Lamed, a big Eilam came to the Rebbe. It was 20 years from the Friedrich Rebbe's Istalkes, from Yuchvat Tovshin Yud, which is automatically 20 years from the Rebbe's Kabbalas and Nesias. So a big Eilam came. And it was a very special Yuchvat. It was even known as Yuchvat HaGodel. Also, one of the things that happened then in the Erev Shabbos, Erev Yuchvat, there was the Siyum of Mashiach Sefer Torah and the Achnos of Mashiach Sefer Torah. That's not the reason why people came, because actually it wasn't known earlier that it's going to be that day. It was known very close to that day. But nevertheless, this is what happened then. Another thing that happened then, there was the first hookup that took place from the Farbrengen. This was to Eretz Yisrael. So the hookup of Yuchvat, the Farbrengen Yuchvat. But that year, Chof Shvat, which was Tuesday, there was a special Farbrengen for Tzeitzchal Mesholem for the guest. And they announced before that there will be a Farbrengen that day after Mincha. After Mincha, which means Mincha was 3:15. This is after Mincha, so this is into the afternoon. And that's the day that a lot of the Orchim from Eretz Yisrael were going home. And this was after Mincha, which was pretty close to the time they were supposed to travel. The Rebbe said a Maimer by the Farbrengen, and he said Siches, and the Elam, who were supposed to travel, got a little bit nervous, because this was very close to when they were supposed to go to the airport. But the Rebbe continued Farbrengen. Then the Rebbe said that once he came into the Friedrich Rebbe when he was in Leningrad, it was a time when that same evening he was supposed to travel from Leningrad to Moscow. And the Rebbe said, to understand the timing, it was a time when the Gzeiras of the Russians against Yiddishkeit was very strong, and wherever the Friedrich Rebbe did, they were looking after him, especially when he was traveling. They were looking after him, and he traveled himself, and it was going to Moscow, which was the capital there. So this was going something that's Mesiras Nefesh. And especially there was a time when they already decided that their patience on what the activities of the Friedrich Rebbe was already came to an end. So it was very dangerous. So this trip was a very special trip, a dangerous trip, and a very special trip. So the Rebbe says, I went into the Friedrich Rebbe. There was no one else in that room. And there was about an hour or half hour, a quarter of an hour before he was supposed to leave his place where he lived, which is Amachavaya 22, to the train station, which was going to Moscow. And I saw that he was sitting very calm, like middle of a regular day, that you couldn't see on him any being nervous or being worried or things like that. And he was involved in something that he was doing that needed attention, that needed concentration, but he was doing it without being nervous that he's supposed to travel soon. Now, the Rebbe says, there is an inyan of Me'ach Shalat Alev, that your mind could control your heart, control your actions. But so much, Ad Kedei Kach, so the Rebbe said, I couldn't hold myself in, and I asked the Friedrich Rebbe, Ad Kedei Kach. So the Friedrich Rebbe told me that he heard, it seems like from the Rebbe Rashab, who heard it from the Rebbe Marash, there's something that's called Hatzlacha In Zman, success in time. What does that mean? You can't stretch time to say that the time becomes bigger, but you could use the time more. And how could you use the time more? That you should use it for as much as you can. That's if when you're doing something, you're completely involved in that inyan that you're doing, and everything else doesn't exist. So even though it's something that's a small time, but you're involved in whatever you're doing, if that's all that exists to you and that you put your attention to that, then you'll be able to accomplish a lot. You'll utilize the time to its fullest. And that's called Hatzlacha In Zman. And he gave an example. It seems like the example came from the Rebbe Marash, from the Rashba, who was one of the Rishonim, that he used to say 3 shiurim every day. He answered a lot of tshuvas. We have a lot of tshuvas printed of the Rashba. And that is a tip in the bucket of what he really wrote. And he was a doctor, he was an actual practicing doctor, healing people. And he even managed to go take a walk every day. And all this is in addition to his davening and the shurim that you learn for himself, that everyone is supposed to do. Now, in order to say a shir for Talmidim, it takes time. It takes, you got to put yourself into it, and you have to spend time for it. Certainly, if it's for Talmidim of the Rashba, who must have been great Talmidim, and not 1 shir, but 3 shiurim a day. Also, when you are a doctor, you have to put yourself full into it. And other things even include the walk that you took. In order to accomplish with a walk that you have to accomplish, you can't be nervous and you can't be worried. So how did the Rashba accomplish all this every day? And the answer is, not from natural point of view, that he was in such a way that when he said a shir, everything else didn't exist. When he went to walk, nothing existed. The greatest thing didn't exist. Even the shir didn't exist, because he was involved in it completely. And if you do that, you could accomplish so much. But it's only if you are completely involved and everything else doesn't exist and you're doing it in a calm way. And that's the answer, that he was sitting in his room, involved in things that needs concentration. needs attention, and it's things which are very important. And even though he was supposed to travel very soon to a different to Moscow, and it was a dangerous trip, that nevertheless he did it because at that moment, what he was doing, nothing else existed. But then the Rebbe said, but the Metzias is that people who know that in an hour or an hour and a quarter, whatever, they have to fly, and you still have to pack your packs, and you have to say goodbye, etc., and you still have to have Ma'ariv. So it's hard to pay on yourself. You should be completely involved and concentrate on this, that thinking that the El Al, the flight El Al doesn't exist at this moment. So the Rebbe said, and he sees that some people are looking at the watch, looking at the clock the whole time, and those people who don't look at the clock, they hold themselves back from looking. It's even harder. It's a bigger bilbil, because when you look at the clock, at least you know how much time is left till you have to go. So you know there's still some time. But if you don't look, you don't know what time it is. So you think maybe it's even worse. So it's much harder. So the Rebbe said, therefore, I'm going to try to be mekatzer and not put Yidden in the soyen, and the Eibishter will help with you, but Hatzlacha In Zman. So here is one of the times that the Rebbe showed that you have to be involved in what you're involved completely, and then you'll accomplish everything. And I just want to add that the same thing happened, that when the Rebbe started saying the Broch on Erev Yom Kippur, Ba'ariches, like this always, the Broch Erev Yom Kippur after Mincha took 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever, it was short. Then, years later, it was a whole Sicha. And the Sicha could take 20 minutes, could take a half hour, could take more. It was a long Sicha that took. And the first time I remember, even though I wasn't there, but you could hear it over the hookup, and I heard that people were getting nervous. They're getting itchy because the Rebbe is speaking, and it's Erev Yom Kippur, and you have to go home, and there's so many things that you have to do, and every moment, you got to utilize for something. And the Rebbe is speaking a Sicha, and continuing, and adding more and more and more. Some people even couldn't hold themselves back, and they just left in the middle because they had to go to the mikveh, they have to eat the Sudam Afsekes, etc., etc. But the Rebbe showed then also that if you utilize every second in a way that you know that whatever you're doing, you're involved, you'll accomplish everything. Hatzlacha In Zman. And the Rebbe himself behaved that way, that whatever he did, he was involved in it completely. And here he showed that he's saying a Sicha on Erev Yom Kippur, after Mincha, when it's not so far before Yom Kippur, and there's so many things that you have to do, but you're able to accomplish everything. And that's only if you put yourself into it completely, that whatever you do with complete concentration, but mainly you'll accomplish it, and then you'll accomplish everything that you have to do.